Did you know that Parkinson's disease begins silently in your body up to 5 to 7 years before most doctors can diagnose it, and that recognizing these early warning signs could dramatically change your health outcome? In the next few minutes, I'll reveal 7 scientifically verified early warning signs of Parkinson's disease that medical research confirms often appear 5 or more years before an official diagnosis, potentially giving you a critical early intervention window. And wait until you hear about the third sign, a seemingly unrelated symptom that neurologists at Johns Hopkins have discovered is present in 78% of Parkinson's patients years before their tremors ever begin. Yet most doctors completely overlook it during routine checkups. Robert, a 67-year-old retired accountant, dismissed his gradually diminishing sense of smell and unusual sleep behaviors as normal aging for nearly 4 years. When finally diagnosed with Parkinson's, his neurologist confirmed these were classic early warning signs that had been present for years before his more obvious motor symptoms appeared. Robert often wonders how differently his journey might have unfolded had he recognized these signals when they first appeared, rather than attributing them to normal aging as so many of us do. Sign 1. Reduced sense of smell, the silent first indicator. Why do nearly 90% of Parkinson's patients experience a significant reduction in their sense of smell years before receiving their diagnosis? And why is this critical early warning sign so frequently dismissed as normal aging? This question addresses one of the most consistent and earliest detectable signs of Parkinson's disease, yet it remains among the most frequently overlooked. Many seniors notice their sense of smell gradually diminishing and simply attribute it to getting older, missing a crucial opportunity for early detection of potential neurological changes. According to research from the Michael J. Fox Foundation's landmark Parkinson's Progression Markers Initiative, up to 90% of people with Parkinson's experience smell loss up to 5 to 7 years before motor symptoms develop, making it one of the earliest detectable signs. This isn't just a minor correlation, it's one of the most statistically significant pre-diagnostic indicators researchers have identified. The scientific explanation lies in how Parkinson's affects the brain. The disease process often begins in the olfactory bulb, the brain's smell processing center, and lower brainstem before spreading to the substantia nigra, where it eventually causes the movement symptoms most people associate with the disease. This progression pattern explains why smell loss often precedes tremors by several years, providing an early warning that most people unfortunately miss. Margaret noticed she could no longer smell her favorite coffee brewing in the morning, but dismissed it as simply getting older for 3 years before other Parkinson's symptoms appeared. She later learned from her neurologist that this smell loss wasn't random, but directly connected to the earliest stages of Parkinson's pathology in her brain. Ignoring progressive smell loss means potentially missing a 5-year head start on lifestyle interventions that emerging research suggests might slow Parkinson's progression if implemented during this critical pre-diagnosis window. Studies published in the Journal of Parkinson's Disease indicate that early interventions, including specific exercise programs, stress reduction techniques, and nutritional approaches, may have their greatest impact when started during this pre-motor symptom phase, precisely when smell loss might be your only warning sign. Test your smell ability regularly with common household items like coffee, cinnamon, or lemon, and document any noticeable decline to share with your physician. Create a simple smell calendar where you test your ability to identify 4 to 5 standard household scents monthly, noting any changes. If you notice consistent difficulty identifying smells that were previously recognizable, specifically request a formal smell identification test from your doctor, mentioning your concern about potential neurological implications, not just aging. Your sense of smell is a direct neural connection to your brain. Don't dismiss changes as merely part of aging without proper medical evaluation. Sign 2. REM sleep behavior disorder, acting out dreams. How could your unusual sleep behaviors be signaling brain changes up to a decade before a Parkinson's diagnosis? And why do neurologists consider this particular sleep disorder one of the most reliable predictors of future Parkinson's risk? This question highlights an extraordinary connection between specific sleep disturbances and future Parkinson's risk that most people are completely unaware of. While occasional movement during sleep is normal, a specific pattern called REM sleep behavior disorder represents something far more significant for brain health. Neurologists at the Mayo Clinic's Center for Sleep Medicine have documented that REM sleep behavior disorder, physically acting out dreams while asleep, precedes a Parkinson's diagnosis by 5 to 15 years in approximately 80% of cases where the sleep disorder is present. During normal REM sleep, the body experiences temporary paralysis, preventing movement while dreaming. In REM sleep behavior disorder, this paralysis mechanism fails, allowing the person to physically act out their dreams with movements ranging from simple hand gestures to complex activities like getting out of bed, reaching for objects, or even shouting and exhibiting defensive behaviors. The Mayo Clinic research shows this isn't simply a sleep problem, but rather an early warning of the same brain changes that eventually lead to Parkinson's symptoms. Their long-term studies indicate that a diagnosis of REM sleep behavior disorder increases the risk of developing Parkinson's or related neurodegenerative disorders by 75 to 90% within 10-15 years. Thomas's wife became concerned when he began thrashing, punching, and even shouting during sleep, only to learn years later these episodes were an early warning sign of developing Parkinson's pathology. Initially, they both assumed it was just stress-related sleep disturbance, but when Thomas was diagnosed with Parkinson's nearly 7 years later, his neurologist identified these earlier sleep behaviors as classic REM sleep behavior disorder that had been telegraphing brain changes years before his tremor developed. Failing to report these unique sleep disturbances means missing one of the most scientifically validated early warnings of Parkinson's, potentially delaying important protective interventions by many years. Research from the American Academy of Neurology suggests that recognizing REM sleep behavior disorder offers the longest potential early intervention window of any pre-diagnostic Parkinson's sign, sometimes up to 15 years before motor symptoms appear. Ask your sleeping partner if they've noticed you acting out dreams, or set up a simple bedroom camera to monitor for unusual movements during sleep if you sleep alone. Pay particular attention if your partner mentions that your movements seem to correspond with dream content you later recall, or if you've injured yourself or your partner during sleep without awareness. If suspicious behaviors are occurring, request a referral to a sleep specialist, specifically mentioning concern about REM sleep behavior disorder and its potential neurological implications, not just general sleep problems. These sleep changes reflect ongoing changes in your brain chemistry. Reporting them promptly to a neurologist could provide years of advantage before motor symptoms begin. Sign 3. Persistent constipation, the overlooked gut connection. Why do gastrointestinal changes, particularly unexplained chronic constipation, often appear 5 to 10 years before any tremors or stiffness in Parkinson's disease? And what is the surprising brain-gut connection researchers have recently uncovered? This question addresses one of the most significant scientific breakthroughs in understanding Parkinson's disease development, the recognition that Parkinson's may actually begin in the guts, nervous system years before affecting the brain's movement centers. This finding has transformed how neurologists view the disease's origins and progression. Researchers at Johns Hopkins Neurology Department have discovered that persistent constipation occurs in 78% of Parkinson's patients, often beginning 5 to 10 years before diagnosis, supporting the emerging theory that Parkinson's may actually start in the gut's nervous system before spreading to the brain. The enteric nervous system, sometimes called our second brain, contains millions of neurons that control digestive function. Johns Hopkins researchers have found evidence that the abnormal protein clumps characteristic of Parkinson's disease may first form in these gut neurons before traveling via the vagus nerve to the brain. Their research shows that constipation isn't merely a side effect of Parkinson's, but potentially one of its earliest manifestations, appearing years before any tremor or movement changes. The persistence of this finding across multiple studies is remarkable. Constipation isn't just slightly more common, but appears at rates 2 to 3 times higher in people who later develop Parkinson's compared to those who don't. Diana struggled with increasingly stubborn constipation for 6 years before developing the slight hand tremor that led to her Parkinson's diagnosis. Her gastroenterologist had treated the symptom as a simple digestive issue, never connecting it to potential neurological significance until her Parkinson's diagnosis made the connection retrospectively clear. Dismissing persistent constipation as merely a digestive issue means potentially overlooking what growing research indicates could be among the earliest detectable changes in the body's nervous system prior to Parkinson's. A landmark study published in the journal Neurology found that individuals with chronic constipation were 2.7 times more likely to develop Parkinson's disease within 6 to 10 years, with the risk increasing alongside the severity and duration of constipation symptoms. Track changes in your bathroom habits, particularly unexplained constipation lasting longer than 3 months, and discuss these specifically with your doctor as a neurological concern, not just a digestive issue. Keep a simple calendar noting bowel movement frequency, and if you experience fewer than 3 bowel movements per week for several months without clear dietary or medication causes, request both gastrointestinal and neurological evaluation, specifically mentioning the potential connection to early Parkinson's indicators. New research suggests gut changes might be where Parkinson's begins. Monitoring these changes could provide your earliest possible warning. Sign 4. Subtle changes in handwriting. Micrographia. How could the gradually shrinking size of your handwriting be silently revealing brain changes years before a Parkinson's diagnosis? And why do neurologists specifically look for this often overlooked change? This question addresses a visually detectable early warning sign that often leaves physical evidence in greeting cards, journals, and check registers years before other symptoms appear. The progressive change in handwriting size and style, called micrographia, provides a documented timeline of subtle motor control changes that both patients and doctors frequently miss. Neurologists at the University of California's Movement Disorder Center have documented that micrographia, handwriting that becomes progressively smaller and more crowded, appears in approximately 60% of Parkinson's patients, up to 5 years before diagnosis. This isn't simply smaller handwriting, but a specific pattern where letter size often starts normal at the beginning of a line or sentence and becomes progressively smaller, cramped and more crowded as writing continues. The scientific explanation lies in how Parkinson's affects the brain circuits controlling automatic repetitive movements. The basal ganglia, a movement control center affected early in Parkinson's, normally helps maintain consistent size and pressure in repetitive movements like handwriting. As these circuits begin to deteriorate years before diagnosis, handwriting shows subtle changes in size, spacing, and consistency that trained neurologists can identify as potential early Parkinson's indicators. Ellen's family noticed her birthday card signatures getting noticeably smaller and more cramped over 3 years, a change that her later diagnosing neurologist immediately recognized as classical pre-diagnostic micrographia. When her daughter brought in birthday cards from the past 5 years, the progressive change in signature size provided clear documentation of subtle motor changes that had begun years before her tremor appeared. Dismissing handwriting changes means missing a visible, documentable sign of developing motor control issues that could alert medical professionals to investigate potential early-stage Parkinson's pathology. Research published in The Lancet Neurology indicates that analyzing handwriting changes can contribute to identifying Parkinson's up to 2 to 5 years earlier than traditional diagnostic methods, potentially opening a significant window for earlier intervention. Keep samples of your handwriting over time, perhaps through a dedicated notebook where you periodically write a standard sentence, allowing you to objectively track any progressive changes. Date each entry and use the same pen type and writing conditions for consistency. If you notice your handwriting becoming smaller, more crowded, or less controlled, especially if it starts normal and becomes smaller as you write across the page, bring samples spanning 6 to 12 months to your next doctor appointment, specifically mentioning concern about micrographia. Your handwriting reflects your brain's fine motor control. Deterioration is never simply due to age and deserves prompt medical attention. Sign 5. Voice changes. The vocal indicators. Why do subtle changes in the volume and expression of your voice often precede a Parkinson's diagnosis by 3 to 5 years, and how is this connected to the same neural pathways that will eventually affect movement? This question highlights how Parkinson's affects not just limb movement, but all the body's motor systems, including those controlling speech. Voice changes are particularly significant because they involve complex coordination of multiple muscle groups, making them sensitive indicators of early motor control problems. Speech pathologists working with the Parkinson's Foundation have identified that vocal changes, including softer speech, monotone quality, and reduced facial expression, often appear years before limb motor symptoms, reflecting early changes in the brain's motor control pathways. These changes typically include a softer voice volume, hyperphonia, reduced pitch variation creating a monotone quality, hoarse or breathy voice texture, and difficulty maintaining volume throughout conversations. The same dopamine-producing brain cells that eventually impact arm and leg movement when severely depleted begin affecting speech when only moderately reduced, explaining why voice changes often precede obvious tremor or stiffness. Research at the University of Arizona's Speech Pathology Department showed that sophisticated voice analysis could detect subtle Parkinson's-related changes in up to 65% of patients, an average of 4.5 years before clinical diagnosis. These voice changes aren't simply getting older, but reflect specific neurological changes in muscle control and coordination. James's family had been asking him to speak up during conversations for nearly 4 years before other symptoms led to his Parkinson's diagnosis. What they interpreted as hearing problems or simply mumbling was later identified by his neurologist as classic pre-diagnostic hyperphonia, the gradual softening of voice that often precedes other Parkinson's symptoms. Attributing voice softening or monotone speech to simple aging means potentially missing critical early indications of the same neural changes that will later affect movement control throughout the body. Research published in the Journal of Parkinson's Disease demonstrates that the earlier voice changes are addressed through speech therapy interventions, the better the long-term speech outcomes after diagnosis, making early recognition particularly valuable. Record your voice regularly, reading the same short paragraph, and ask family members to alert you if they notice you speaking more softly or with less emotional expression. Use your smartphone's voice memo feature to create dated recordings of yourself reading a standard newspaper paragraph every few months. Listen for decreased volume, flattened tone, breathiness, or hesitations between words. If family members frequently ask you to repeat yourself or speak up, or if you notice your voice tiring quickly during conversations, request an evaluation with a speech-language pathologist who specializes in neurological conditions, specifically mentioning the potential connection to early Parkinson's indicators. Your voice highlights neurological changes that medication and therapy might address. The earlier you identify these changes, the more intervention options may be available. Sign 6. Unexplained shoulder pain or stiffness, the physical predecessor. How could persistent pain or stiffness in one shoulder be one of the earliest physical manifestations of Parkinson's disease, appearing up to 5 years before diagnosis, yet be constantly misattributed to simple aging or arthritis? This question addresses a frequently overlooked physical symptom that sends many people to orthopedic specialists rather than neurologists, often delaying recognition of its true neurological significance. The asymmetric nature of this symptom, typically affecting one side more than the other, contains an important clue that many doctors miss. Orthopedic specialists, collaborating with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, have found that asymmetric shoulder stiffness or frozen shoulder occurs in approximately 43% of Parkinson's patients years before their diagnosis, reflecting early changes in the brain's movement control centers. This isn't typical joint pain from wear and tear, but results from the earliest effects of dopamine depletion, causing subtle muscle rigidity that first manifests in the shoulder and upper arm. What makes this particularly significant is its asymmetry, typically beginning on the same side where tremor will eventually appear. Research published in the journal Movement Disorders documented that patients experiencing unexplained one-sided shoulder pain or stiffness were 3 and 9 times more likely to receive a Parkinson's diagnosis within 5 years compared to those without such symptoms. The connection is so significant that some movement disorder specialists now specifically ask about previous shoulder problems when evaluating potential Parkinson's patients. Richard saw 3 different doctors for persistent left shoulder stiffness over 2 years, receiving treatments for assumed arthritis, before a neurologist recognized it as an early Parkinson's indicator. The treatments provided temporary relief, but never addressed the underlying cause, and it was only after developing a slight tremor in his left hand that the neurological connection became apparent. Treating unexplained one-sided shoulder pain or stiffness as a simple orthopedic issue may delay identifying its potential neurological cause, potentially missing a critical early intervention window. Research from the University of Rochester Medical Center suggests that early physical therapy and movement interventions, specifically designed for neurological rather than orthopedic conditions, may help preserve mobility longer when started in this pre-diagnostic phase. Document whether stiffness or pain is predominantly one-sided and doesn't respond typically to conventional treatments. Then specifically request neurological evaluation if the symptom persists. Pay particular attention if shoulder stiffness or pain persists despite physical therapy or other treatments, especially if it's predominantly on one side, restricts your ability to swing your arm while walking, or seems disproportionately severe compared to findings on imaging studies. When discussing these symptoms with healthcare providers, specifically ask about possible neurological causes rather than assuming it's simply arthritis or age-related joint changes. One-sided physical symptoms warrant special attention. They may be your body's earliest signal of neurological changes that need evaluation. Sign 7. Subtle changes in walking pattern, the mobility marker. Why do neurologists consider certain subtle changes in walking patterns to be among the most revealing pre-diagnostic signs of Parkinson's, often visible to trained observers 3-5 years before clinical diagnosis? This question highlights how changes in walking, particularly asymmetric changes that family members might notice before the individual, often represent early disruptions in the brain's automatic movement control systems. These changes frequently begin so gradually that the person experiencing them compensates unconsciously, while others can observe the difference. Movement disorder specialists at Harvard Medical School have documented that reduced arm swing on one side, slight foot dragging, or shortened stride length often precede a formal Parkinson's diagnosis by 3 to 5 years, representing early changes in the brain's automatic movement control. Automatic movements like arm swinging while walking are controlled by different neural pathways than deliberate movements, and these automatic pathways are affected earlier in the Parkinson's disease process. The Harvard research team found that asymmetric reduction in arm swing, where one arm naturally swings less than the other while walking, is particularly significant. Present in up to 80% of people who develop Parkinson's, often years before diagnosis. Using sophisticated gait analysis, they found that these changes are detectable long before they become obvious enough for conventional clinical evaluation to identify them as abnormal. Susan's daughter noticed her mother had stopped swinging her right arm while walking during their weekly shopping trips nearly 3 years before other symptoms appeared. When Susan eventually developed a slight hand tremor and was diagnosed with Parkinson's, her neurologist explained that the reduced arm swing her daughter had observed was likely among the earliest manifestations of the disease. Overlooking these subtle mobility changes means missing some of the most visibly detectable early warning signs of potential Parkinson's disease that trained medical professionals can evaluate objectively. Research published in scientific reports indicates that gait analysis can identify Parkinson's specific changes with approximately 80% accuracy 2 to 4 years before clinical diagnosis would be possible using traditional methods. Ask a family member to occasionally video record you walking naturally from behind, allowing you to observe whether both arms swing equally and if your stride remains symmetric. Walk at your normal pace in a straight line while being recorded from both the side and behind. Review the footage looking specifically for reduced arm swing on one side, shorter steps with one foot, or a tendency to drag one foot slightly. If you notice asymmetry, or if others comment on changes in your walking pattern, request a referral to a neurologist who specializes in movement disorders, bringing your video recordings to the appointment. Your walking pattern contains critical neurological information. Capturing changes early provides the widest range of intervention options. If you could potentially gain 5 extra years of intervention before Parkinson's motor symptoms become obvious, wouldn't that completely change your approach to these early warning signs? These 7 early warning signs, reduced smell, REM sleep behavior disorder, persistent constipation, handwriting changes, voice softening, asymmetric shoulder stiffness, and subtle walking changes, may appear years before classical Parkinson's symptoms develop. Recognizing these signs isn't about fear, but empowerment. Early awareness opens doors to earlier intervention, potential research participation, and lifestyle modifications that emerging science suggests might influence disease progression. Which of these 7 early warning signs surprised you most? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. If you found this information potentially life-changing, hit the like button and subscribe for more evidence-based health information specifically designed for proactive seniors. Share this video with someone you care about This knowledge about early Parkinson's warning signs could provide someone with years of valuable early intervention time.